Good evening, everyone. So, when I was sitting around and we were trying to figure out topics for this month, it was kind of nice how they kind of blend in with each other. And it was kind of funny because I'm sitting here thinking, like, well, what should I do? What should I do? And my thought originally is like, well, it's tax time. And the first thing that came to me was render unto Caesar what was Caesar's. So I was like, okay. So I'm thinking, all right, how do you separate out? And that's where it kind of came up with this idea of separating out the material in our life versus the spiritual. Because we all live our lives, and for the most part, majority of our lives, it's in the physical realm. It's material. We're looking for food. We're looking for money. We got to breathe air. We got all these material things. The EKG with the heart rate. It has to do its thing to keep us alive. So this is one of those topics where we're sitting here thinking about it. It was like, how do we start to separate our soul, our spirit, and take into account the spiritual side of our life? It's so easy to focus on the material 24/7, 365, and we kind of forget the spiritual. It was one of my little things that when I came into the Spiritism, one of the few things that I kind of liked about it is it forced me to think spiritually 24/7, 365, as compared to you're going to spend 1 hour at church on a Sunday or 2 to 3 hours, depending if you go to Catholic Mass or things like this. So you go to that, and that's supposed to be good for the whole week. And I was like, yeah, you're tipping the scales the wrong way. And especially when you start realizing that when you look at the principles of the Spirit, the morals, the things of the Spirit, they're not tangible. You don't touch them, but they have profound effects. They stretch for miles. They cross boundaries. They connect hearts. They connect minds. Whole civilizations are molded through moral codes, through how we treat each other. It's like all these societies we have out there. When you go back and you look at when the 10 Commandments were given to the Jews and how that sculpted history, from that point forward, all of a sudden it wasn't just whatever, like survival of the fittest and everything else. Now all of a sudden you had a code. You had 10 rules that locked in and sit there and started to choosing your life. And then as I've been reading through some of the books to dive into it, when you start reading how the tablets, some of it is sculpted for God, some of it is sculpted for how you treat your fellow human beings. It's like that alone was also very profound to sit there and say, like, here's rules for how you should treat each other. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Honor thy mother and father. So when you start looking at these things, it's like this, there's nothing material attached to it. Well, maybe the do not steal. But then when you realize the spiritual component on top of it, it's like, yeah, the material is minuscule. But when you have that overarching, that spiritual thing, it is far greater, far more powerful. It's like I was talking with some other people, and we were mentioning about how within Spiritism they always talk about the 3 revelations. So you have the 10 Commandments with Moses, you have Jesus as the second one, and then you have the codifier, Allan Kardec, with the Spiritist doctrine as the 3rd revelation. But notice the gap between the different revelations. So it's like they give the 10 Commandments, and it took how many years? 3,000 years before you got to Christ, and then you go almost another 2,000 years before you get to the codification. So he's like, in all that time, how much was it taken to absorb and for humanity to take those spiritual principles and bring them into our daily lives? And in some cases, we still haven't got that right. We're still struggling with even the 10 Commandments, let alone when you start breaking into Jesus's golden rule. Treat others as you would like to be treated. It's like how simple that saying is and how profound it affects everything we do. Because as I was sitting here, like I was talking to Peter about it, it was one of my little podcast things I was debating on, and it's one of the ones I actually recorded, was splitting the two parts of the golden rule. Love the God, your Father, with all your heart, with all your mind, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So I split it into two. And as I was going through it, I was like, especially with the golden rule and everything we got going on in today's life, you sit there, you think of everything you see on the news, everything you see in politics, everything you see at work, everything you see in the house, goes right into the golden rule. And if we would follow the golden rule, how much of our stuff would disappear? If we follow the 10 Commandments, how much of our stuff would disappear? So, we're seeing all these things in the news, like Trump's going into court again and everything else, and it's like, but for whatever was going on in his past, no matter your politics, I'll leave, that's another topic, another day. But when you look at it and you sit there and say, like, the things wrapped around it, are we treating Trump as we want to be treated? Did Trump treat whoever, why he's in hot water in court? Did he treat whoever they was as the way they want to be treated? How is this working out? So just as food for thought. When you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off. Yeah, you're probably a little mad. You're a little upset. But do you do the same thing to others? Do you also cut people off? It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's my exit. And you scare some people because you dive across 3 lanes of traffic to get your exit. We all have these moments where we kind of forget ourselves and we forget our things. But then again, that's kind of what the topic is about. Remembering the spiritual over the material. We were just talking right before we came in, and it was one of those things where it's like, I believe it was St. Augustine that was sitting there that did the know thyself. And I don't know if he was also the same one, or if it was St. Francis, that would sit there at the end of the day and he would think. He would sit there and say, have I done all the good that there is to me? Is there a person out there that has reason to hate me? St. Augustine, thank you. So he would sit at the end of every day reflecting on his day and seeing how he helped or did he hurt somebody. Does someone have cause to hate him? And this is something that we've been brought into, especially for those of us that read the codification, that read like the gospel specifically. The gospel hits us very, very hard. Whereas the Spirit's book, it's mainly part 3, the moral laws. So you start reading through these sections and you start understanding, this is like, as the doctrine is philosophy, religion, science. The philosophy incorporates a way of life. It shows that you're supposed to live a life according to the doctrine, and that doctrine is based upon the 2 prior revelations. So live the 10 Commandments, live the golden rule. So you're kind of sitting here trying to figure out, and then one of the other centers I was involved with, they had a special class. Anyone that was new to Spiritism, they would go through a introduction to Spiritism, and that thankfully that was taken and given to the United States Spirits Federation, so it's like available online, and then they've modified it and altered it since. But it was still a great thing for it to do an as part of the you do the intro, and then right behind it there was an inner transformation. Now, why would you do that when you're coming into learning this for the first time? And part of it was sitting there saying, well, what's the hook? Spiritism has the three legs: the philosophy, the religion, and the science. And each one is based on a book. Philosophy is in the Spirit's book, the religion's in the Gospel, the science is in the Medium's book. We don't usually mess with the Medium's book too much in the public meetings, but it's still a book that's freely available to read. I did the one a couple months ago about the obsessions, the types of obsession, which was in the Medium's book. But it was one of those things like, which of those three appeals to you the most? What's the hook? What grabbed you? For me, it was the gospel, the moral law, all that morality and living a moral life. As I said in my last time I was here, the very emotional one I did, part of it is because I felt a need when I came into this life to live a moral, principled life. I've had that feeling since I was 8 years old, at least. And so when I started reading this doctrine and seeing this stuff, and it was telling you to, yes, live this life, I was like, Eureka! I didn't get that in church. I didn't get that in synagogue or wherever else I was at. I got it in reading the doctrine freely, on my own. I mean, we've had plenty of groups that they read the Spirit's book, or they read the Gospel. Actually, one of the online ones I've been doing lately, they're about to switch to the Gospel. I was like, I've been part of 5 different Spirit book groups during a week, because being out in Sarasota, there's no centers there. So, it was recommended to me. So basically, said be like Paul. Paul traveled to all the churches around the Mediterranean, and that's how we have the epistles. But they says like, I'm going to deflate my ego. I'm not that Paul. I'm not going to write epistles. I'm not going to be that kind of thing. But travel. Be a part of the centers in Fort Myers. Be part of the centers in Tampa. Be part of the centers here in Orlando. Be part of the centers back in New Jersey. It's like, reach out and be a connecting thread to these different centers. And thus, what am I doing with that? I'm building bonds of friendship. I'm building this fraternal bond with all these other people, all these other centers. And like, to go with the topic, and I didn't even switch slides yet. There's no material gain. We're volunteers. Give freely what was given. So I'm here of my own free will, my own gas. Well, actually, no, that's a company car. So, but that's because that's the only car I have. But
we're gonna add it to tape.
That's all right. They know I got permission. So, and it's funny because my boss was actually here yesterday. He has family in Orlando, so he does the same thing. But it was one of those things. It's like, I'm reaching out and building this bond and connecting people. I'm here talking to you today, and after, when we're done with the passes and everything else, I'll be out there shaking hands, saying thank you for coming and everything else, answering questions, giving warm hugs to those who need it or something, and being there and saying and building that connection. Because as we're finding out, especially within the doctrine really hammers this point out. We're meant to interact with each other. We're meant to dialogue. We're meant to have these connections. We're meant to have these disagreements. We're meant to argue but through arguments, we're trying to find different viewpoints. And again, I'm not talking anything material. It's like, I see, husband sees this, wife sees this, and they clash. And yes, there's always the rules that happy wife, happy life. So it's like, yes, dear, and move on. But is it there? But are they still able to dialogue and talk and say, hey, this is how I see it, and then switch over and think, this is how I see it, and together you see things from 2 points of view, so that you can make a better decision. Same thing with everything here. Why is there multitude of speakers? speaking here. All of us have different viewpoints. All of us have different things to share. We all have different backgrounds. So we each speak from our own thing, our own points of view, what's most important to us. Like I says, my hook was the gospel. Like, I want to live a moral life. So every time I'm up here, I speak from that point of view. How should I live my life that's moral? And I share that with you when I'm up here. Because that's important to me, and I feel like that should be important to you too. So now I'll get to the main crux of this. So, thank you. In one of the smaller books that we have out there, Spiritism in Simplest Expression, they have this little section in here. And again, it's going right with what I've been talking about so far. As much as I would love to walk, I know the video camera doesn't like to follow me. Selfishness, pride, vanity, ambition, greed, hatred, envy, jealousy, defamation. Again, we got a lot of the commandments in there. We got some of the deadly sins in there. We don't have gluttony that I can see, but we got some of the other ones. We got most of the other ones in there. And you sit there and when you go through your life, are you being selfish? Are you having too much pride? So we always have that big debate, especially like World Cup. We all have our teams. We all share our colors and everything else, and we have our pride for our team, pride for our country. Same with the Olympics and everything else, and you have that. But is it a good pride or is it a bad pride? Because is it I'm more proud of my daughter doing something right for the first time or achieving something. But if I'm sitting here saying I'm rooting on Brazil for the World Cup, and I was like down with Argentina or something like the typical rivalry, is that good?
That's wrong. I just want to make sure I understand.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Go for it.
Why is ambition seen as a poisonous weed? To me, that's a positive virtue. Why would it be so negative?
Because it's tied with the other ones. It's especially pride and selfishness, greed. Because when you're sitting here looking at it, and I'll use a personal experience for this. I'm sitting here working in my profession as in construction management. I had a boss over me, and he wanted to go up the corporate ladder as fast as he can, and he was doing it. But the way for him to do it was stealing our glory. We would work hard. He would go in there and say, like, hey, look, we got this done. I got this done for you. No accolades to the team. He got all the rewards. He got his promotion. He went up the chain. But he stepped on people along the way, and he hurt them. So, and then sure enough, if something went wrong, if one of our projects was going over budget or so we had a massive calamity, he was very quick to make sure, like, oh, that team is terrible. I'm going to fire them right away. Well, he was protecting his ambition. He was protecting his flight up. Now, you're right. There is some ambition that is good. I had ambition to come up here and speak. But I had to check. I have to check my pride. I have to check my vanity. I have to check all these other things here. I have to make sure that I am not hurting others on my path. I can't sacrifice someone else's ambitions over my own. It should be within the doctrine. It should be a collaborative effort. If it's like a unified ambition, like within the doctrine, it's a unified ambition for all of us to progress and become perfect. If not in this lifetime, in the next successive lifetimes, we should always be striving to be better. That is a universal ambition. But when you start hurting people along the way, that's the poisonous weed. And then the antidote, charity and humility. Have to keep those in mind. Yeah, I may want a new car, and I have to save up money for it and everything else. And that's the humbleness part of it. I just can't go and steal a car.
Yeah, it's something.
Go for it.
It's not the word itself. It's how you use it. It's the hardness or how hard you paint the colors of that. Because there's nothing wrong with most of them, but those are trick words because you're being tempted to keep using up to a point that you just cross the line. And once you cross the line, it's really hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I see jealousy. I don't see that being on the same level as ambition. Ambition is pretty ambiguous, whereas jealousy, that's obviously
Pride
a
as
very
well.
negative thing.
Pride as well.
Yeah,
Because it can be pride.
pride's another one that's.
But it's always where you draw the line. So it's always about where do you draw the line.
And to add to it, it's maybe not just where you draw the line, it's where the other person draws the line.
It's like what he said about the St. Augustine. Think about you did right or wrong.
Yeah. Does someone have a cause to go against you? That's my personal experience. I was hurt because my efforts did not lead to me getting a promotion. It went to this manager, and he rocketed up the chain. As long as people were doing a good job, he was taking their credit and he was going up the chain, and no one else below him got any rewards or got any accolades, and they did not progress. It was painful, and it built resentment.
I can just add to that. I think it's a good point that you bring. Pride, vanity, and ambition, they can be positive, but I think the point is that what the issue is the imbalance. And how do we know if we are in the unbalance of it? It's pretty much in our conscience. It's just like the golden rule, right?
Golden rule, and if we're keeping the charity and humility, go for it.
I'm gonna add my 2 cents to here. Like Father just asked, how do I know where is the line here? Where are we gonna draw the line? So that's why we have this Spirit's book that we can refer back to the laws of nature. So we have the law of progress. That's going to tell us a lot about ambition and where you can draw the line. We're going to have the law of society, so we can put our both sides there and see where we stand morally on that, and we can make our choices according to that.
And also, since we are social creatures, we are meant to interact with each other. We're meant to be able to reflect upon each other. How many times again, I'll use the old saying, is like, does this shirt make my butt look big? Those kind of questions. So, but why is that question even asked?
Even defamation, that it seems like the hardest word. It's like, have you never did that? Like in a small way, like, oh, that guy, yeah, son, you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the heaviness that we put over the words.
Yeah. But again, it's starting to separate that, like it says, the materialism to it. When you start looking at, especially like vanity, I know a woman that she was very big on her image. Some of it's from her childhood trauma, growing up, being perceived as heavy set and everything else, rejected by guys and everything else, and instead of getting a car, she ended up going for the plastic surgery. So after that, her life turned her right around. So she was no longer perceived as heavy set. She was perceived as beautiful. She was perceived as all this stuff, and it went to her head. So she, for all that effort that she put into herself and her looks and everything else, she maintained that for the rest of her life, even to this day. She's sitting here making sure that she's looking good, she looks beautiful, she's keeping skinny, everything else. She refused to have kids because she didn't want to ruin what she paid so much money for. That's vanity. Because, you're going against When you're going against laws of nature, you're going against, like, to go on, have children, learn from that experience. Don't be stuck in yourself. Sit there and say, like, oh, I have to be beautiful all the time. And I was like, when I talked to her recently, she's still fairly lonely. She's so absorbed with her looks and everything else, she forgets the other person. And it hurt her, and it's cost her. And I don't know how many things I see on social media today, like good, like if you find a good guy, find a good girl, what to do, if you got a toxic relationship, all kinds of stuff out there. They're giving advice. But part of it also has to do with the fact that it's like, it goes back to these two words on the bottom: charity, humility. Are we being charitable to the other person? Are you being charitable to that person on a date? Are you charitable to your spouse? Are you humbling yourself to your friend, the date, your spouse? Are you keeping things in mind and realizing that you're working together as a team? Like, because part of this thing about doctrine, and all of us here today, one of the great things about the doctrine, especially like when I travel and go to the symposiums and all these, and going to see these other centers, that warmth, that thing, that community that comes from these centers that pop up. I'm sure it happens in churches and things like this too, but it was one of those great things. It's like when you come together as a community, that bond. It's like you have that warmth, that strength, that feeling that transcends. Again, nothing material is involved. You're focusing in on your spirit, your spiritual level, the power of your own spirit and how it can reach out and connect. We see through the doctrine how, like, your spirit can move at the speed of thought, faster than light, faster than anything materialistically possible today. You just, bam, you're there. Your spirit is capable of so much more. Yes, it's currently wrapped in a material outing, but it's not forever. When we sit there and read some of these books outside of the doctrine, you read the books of like Nassolar. I'm reading Planetary Transitions from Miranda, and the powers of the spirits in the spiritual world that they can manifest without a body, the things they can do is amazing. And just reading about that and seeing the potential of the human soul, what it can do, how it manifests your thoughts, and the power of that. There was every so often I keep getting reminded of this, that we got to do one of these lectures on Mr. Emoto with his water crystals and how he would freeze these water crystals, but he would treat the water separately. So he would play Beethoven, Mozart, some wonderful classical music, and he gets these beautiful crystals. It's like a true snowflake. And then he would play heavy metal, rap, and it would be distorted. It wouldn't be beautiful. He would say kind, loving words, beautiful crystal. Hateful words, wouldn't get a beautiful crystal. And he would do this over and over and over again in a series of experiments, telling a water that it needs to commit suicide to the point that there was a crystal that looked like it was holding a gun. I was like, how does water even know how to do that? But then, transferred over, human body is mostly water. So if water by itself retains that energy, retains that thing, should we not also be applying that to ourselves and to all of us around us? Should we not be promoting kindness? Should we not be promoting good thoughts, well wishes to all that we meet? Whether they hurt us in the past or not, we should be pushing and striving to make their life better, even if it is with a kind word. I've used this one before, but I'll bring it up again. I remember a story many, many years ago, right when I was when about a doorman in New York City, and he had a saying as people were leaving in the morning. He would say, "Have a beautiful, blessed day," and he would do that to everyone. Well, someone took offense to "blessed," and he's like, "Oh, religion, gotta fire him." And he was fired. But what happened afterwards is that the people that were staying at that hotel, they got to listen to him on the morning of, and they came to his rescue because after a while they noticed he was missing, and they realized that him saying "Have a beautiful, blessed day" in the morning changed their entire day. They could have woken up and found out that their wife cheated on them and everything else, and then they're going off and like, "Oh, great, I got to go to work," and realize that things are going to crap at home. But yet he gets there and says like, "Have a beautiful, blessed day." He's no longer carrying that negative baggage with him out to his job, out to his profession, whatever meeting he has. Why do you think we have vibrations here at the end of this lecture? Same purpose. We're trying to go and uplift ourselves and all those we meet. So going back, actually within the Spirits book, really calls out destroying materialism. Physically calls it out right there. Question 799, right in the answer. And also destroying the prejudices of sect, caste, and color. Things that divide us. And how many times we even see that, like we were just talking before with the ambition. Things that divide us. Things that hurt people, oppress people, push people down. It's not supposed to be the way it works. When we work together and we collaborate, we create wonderful things. It was like one of those things I always loved about when I was joking around with American history, because you had all this supposed melting pot, and it works for Brazil too. Because you have all these people that came over and started a new country, United States and everything else, and then they would come from all these different cultures, and they were invited to say, throw off your past. You're here now. You're an American now. It doesn't matter if you're Brazilian, Russian, Irish, Saudi Arabian, Australian. Doesn't matter. You're here. Come here. You embrace the culture of being an American, and you share what you brought from your past amongst itself. And it's interesting to see, because like how many things have been created through collaboration. I usually love cuisine as my choice, because you sit there and you think about how things have been changed or Americanized when they came over here. I love Mexican food. But traditional Mexican food doesn't have lettuce, tomatoes, sour cream. It's usually meat, cheese, beans wrapped in the tortilla. So it was an American influence. That's why I like Tex-Mex, not Mexican. But same thing with pizza. You go sit there and say like pizza originally was mostly sauce, and then all of a sudden someone had a bright idea to put cheese on it, and now we have the modern pizzas that we know and love today. We collaborated. We took something that was good in one culture, modified it a little bit, and created something new. How many innovations have you seen today? Things that have been brought together, pulled together, just from people working together? Me being a sci-fi guy, I was watching the behind the scenes for Star Wars, like one of those Inside the Magic documentaries. And they were sitting there taking, like, how did they make the original Star Wars movie back in 1977? They brought all these people that were misfits. They couldn't fit in with the traditional movie thinking. But that's their power. They didn't fit. They came in, they collaborated, they worked together, and they created the powerhouse we know today as Industrial Light and Magic. That has created all these wonderful creations in movies ever since. And it's been continuously pushing the boundaries in a lot of the blockbuster movies we see. But that was just because of people coming together with differences, working together, and creating something beautiful. So, but again, I'm focusing on ideas, thoughts, passions. Again, I'm staying outside the material zone. I'm not focusing on, like, oh, how much money do you have? How much money? It's like, oh, I need your nice car. It's like, that doesn't matter anything. We also, from the doctrine itself, we also read about how we don't take our material possessions with us. We even leave our body behind. The only thing that goes on is our spirit, our thoughts, our experiences, our connections to our loved ones. We keep those. We take those on. The spirit endures forever. It's not just a saying you hear in church. But it's one of those things, it's like when you actually sit and think about it. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Just sit and think. Take 10, 15 minutes at the end of every day and focus on if you've wronged somebody, if you hurt somebody. Or if you can think, or maybe also say, it's like have I treated my spirit well today? Have I thought spiritually? Taken care of my spirit? Now, as the doctor was saying, we're transitioning. Or actually, and many of the books over there are starting to say that how Earth is transitioning. No longer trials and expiations. We're still fighting it. But there shall come a day, don't know if it's going to be years or decades, where Earth will become a world of regeneration. There will be a relative peace. We'll still make mistakes, but it won't be the cause for wars. It won't be the cause for people to be murdered or anything like that. We'll get to that spot where good and evil kind of balance out, and we'll be able to start thinking things through at a higher level. So again, when you go back to think of history, it's like the doctrine, as we know today, could not exist at the time of Jesus, could not exist at the time of the Israelites with Moses. Humanity just did not have the mental capacity at the time. It waited until we got to the age of reason, the age of enlightenment. That's when it started to kick in. And that's when we start getting in. Because when you read the doctrine, how much of it is abstract? The biggest question for me, question number 1 in the Spirit's book. What is God? The supreme intelligence, the first cause of all things. There's not a material thing in that thing. Intelligence. Intelligence isn't material. Cause. So again, also not material. And if it's just even having God himself, it's like, yeah, we have the pictures, the Sistine Chapel has some lovely creations and everything. When you sit there and think about it, God is outside material, outside anything material. Because as soon as you put God in materialism, doctrine even specifies. I think heaven and hell is when it goes into it. It limits. God's outside of his creation. He's the painter. He's the artist. We're the canvas. Like it says, we're the car outside. Car doesn't share anything with the creator, the builder. It's utilized by the builder. It's utilized by the creator. It doesn't share a lot of commonalities. So when we start thinking about ourselves and we start thinking of our spirit, and how it was created and how it is built to endure, how it's meant to progress, how it's meant to learn, move on, we can start to see that things like materialism, sex, caste, color, they have no meaning. They have no grander meaning. They're very shallow. They're totally surface. I mean, it's like most of us here, at least, should be somewhat familiar of like the civil rights movements, when the battles for equality of genders and the races that's happened in the 20th century. And they sit there and look at it, and one of the biggest things they say is like, no matter the color of your skin, do you still bleed red? No matter where you grew up or who you were, you still have a brain. You still, I mean, for the most part, you have 2 eyes, you have a torso, arms, legs. You have the things that make you human, and they are shared. It doesn't matter if you're high-born, low-born, like the castes, or if you're one race or the other race. You start looking at it from that point, especially like it says, when you look at spirit as pure energy. Even our paraspirit is like energy, material combined. You start looking at it that way. It's like, there's nothing, there shouldn't be anything to separating us. The only thing that would truly separate us is our past experiences, our past knowledge, our past connections. What we know, what we don't know. But then again, that's why we're brought together. For those that read like the Nosolar books and the like I said, I was reading Planetary Transitions. And it was fun to read Planetary Transitions because like in the first part of the book, when it's talking about the tsunami that's wiped out a massive part of Indonesia in 2004, you have these spirits coming to help. And you see, he starts naming Sikhs, Islamic imams, bishops, cardinals, spiritists, all these spirits from all these different religions descending down, helping the people that had their bodies destroyed in that tsunami, and how they came and started rescuing all those people. All these spirits from all different walks of life, they didn't have that caste sect thing. When it was time when they needed to come and help, they all came and helped. That fraternity, that goodwill, she came through and shared. And then now, like I said, I'm not finished with the book, but I just got to the part here where they were talking about a group from the Pleiades, Asalon or something like that. I forget the name of the planet exactly. But they were saying it's like in the book, they were out on the beach with 1,000 spirits that are coming from a higher order world. They're going to reincarnate in our world and become those people that are going to help enlighten us and help us along. They're going to take on our burdens, our pains, our torments, our tortures, everything else, but and say, we've already conquered this. We're going to show you the way. Yes, you have these materialistic tendencies, but we're going to say, it doesn't matter. So if that book, I'm just extrapolating here, if the tsunami happened in 2004, that book was written a few years later, then there are teenagers, or they're already in college. That 1,000 people that was referenced in the book, they're here already. And that's just Brazil that was mentioned. Imagine all these other people, all these other spirits. What?
What is the book called?
Planetary Transitions. It's Divaldo Franco by Miranda, yeah. And I was like I says, it was a bit of a shocker when I was reading those first few pages, because it's like I was saying before, the 2004 was right before I got introduced to Spiritism, and I had a friend, my coworker, that actually went to vacation in Indonesia, didn't come back. So it was strange reading that and realizing that I'm reading about spirits helping people that were caught in that tidal wave, and realizing that I'm reading about these same spirits that were helping my coworker at the time. Him and his wife that went there for vacation. It was like their 15th anniversary honeymoon or something like that. It was like their second honeymoon type thing. They went there and didn't come home. But here I am reading about them in a book, and then like it says, like within a year, I get introduced to the doctrine. And I've been with it pretty much ever since. It's molded my life. It's made me think, like it says, like I think about these things now. I kind of get chastised a little bit when people come over and visit, as I have like 2 big bookcases in my apartment, and I have 2 full rows of Spiritist books, kind of like that over there. Like take the top 2, all full of Spiritist books. And then I would have other books. I'd have like I gotta have the Tolkien Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. I have Harry Potter and some of the other fun books, some history books. Gotta have the Bible in there too.
Star Wars.
Some of the Star Wars, yeah. But yeah, and I had to have all those books in there. But the biggest section by far is the Spiritist books, the religious books. Why? Again, I told you my reason. I had to live a principled life, driving force for me. So I had to study and learn and realize that, and then like the doctrine helps me to understand that my actions have consequences. I didn't realize that the Newton's 3 laws of physics also apply to morality. When you start thinking about it, when you take all 3 of them, about action, body at rest tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. So humanity won't progress unless something happens to it. Pain, inspiration, love, whatever. Then all of a sudden that's an outside force and forces it to move. An equal and opposite reaction. I send out love, I get love back. I send out hate, I get hate back. It's funny because it also gets a new name called karma. And then you have momentum. Like as you build, if you keep doing good upon good upon good upon good, you progress faster. And you build that momentum of being a good person. And it shows, and it becomes, and it enlightens your path. And as we see within the doctrine, all these people that are wayward, that do evil or do bad things, there's a momentum to slow them down, to stop them. They're hitting the brakes so they don't do nearly as much damage as before. And we can kind of see this. I hate to use wars, but again, it's one of those big things I can say, especially like we dropped the atomic bombs in World War II. We've had so many wars after that. Not one involved another atomic weapon, ever. Why? We realized we did something that was too powerful. We finally found a weapon that we said we should not use. No matter how mad, no matter how angry we are. The majority of the people on this planet realize the power of that weapon and says, do not use it. They'll use other things. They'll use bullets. They'll use explosives. They'll do everything else. But the fact that they found a point, it says like, no matter how much I don't like you, I will not use this weapon. What does that say? That we finally hit the brakes. When we would be building all these weapons of war and everything else, and realizing that we finally hit to a point that stops. And then progress on. We have floating over our heads the International Space Station, put together by enemies of the Cold War, economic enemies, people that don't see eye to eye, and yet over our heads flies a space station in a inhospitable environment, not meant for human life, but through collaboration, working together, it exists. If we can put that together, and if we can sit there and realize that there are things in this planet that can stop us, that we should stop using, if we keep that mentality and keep thinking bigger, grander, outside the material, we're on our way to being that world of regeneration. We will stop a lot of the pains and sufferings we are encountering by just taking that into account. When you sit there and think about your actions, the actions of others, there might be a purpose for it, good or bad, has a purpose. But if we can make the net reactions that we encounter positive, how many things go away? One of the grandest things I love about being here in Florida, we love Florida. We love the state of Florida. We take care of Florida. We pick up after ourselves. We don't leave messes. We don't throw trash and everything else, at least not intentionally. So Florida looks cleaner. It looks nicer. We take good care of it. There are places that don't. I won't name them. But that's the thing. When we put love, charity, humility onto these projects, onto what we plan to do, look what we accomplish. How many things in this world would be better if we would just put humility and charity into our thoughts? With that, I think I've set the vibrational tone for you, Alan. You can take us the rest of the way.